is what drives the story. And I don't think you necessarily, I mean, I've been shot at and I've, done a lot of operations around the world, but that doesn't make me a good writer. What makes a good book are the characters. I mean, you could, if I was going to write a story about a car bomb going off in a parking lot and it's an empty parking lot, who cares? The only reason you care is that if there's somebody in that parking lot that is a character that I've built or somebody else has built that you care about, you want to protect that person. You're invested in that person. A car bomb going off in an empty parking lot is irrelevant. A car bomb going off with somebody you've created is a whole nother kettle of fish.
I agree 100% with you about characters being the driver of books and antagonists. I think you always have to have a good antagonist. You bring to your books an amazing amount of contemporary issues, technology, sort of status quo items. When I was reading this book, my favorite part of this book was 8675309. And in case you are unaware, his favorite, one of his lead characters, her name happens to be Jenny. And in case you don't know, Jenny 8675309 was a very popular song in its day. And certainly someone who remembers that song would know that reference. But you also talk about Amazon Echo 2s and COVID and Zello and vaping. And I was very impressed with the amount of technology and modern day, I'm not sure what to call it. It's more than technology, but these modern day references, you're obviously very much on top of current affairs, and you bring a lot of that to all of your novels. Do you think that that contributes a great deal?
Yeah, absolutely. That's probably the hardest thing that I have to do writing novels. When I first started writing, I mean, I just got out of a special mission unit, and I knew everything that was going on. But technology has gone so fast; it is ripping through everything. It used to be back in the day. When I say back in the day, I'm talking about when I was in the military. You had there was a Q guy in the CIA who would give you the Maserati that had the headlights or whatever. Now it's criminals. They're outpacing everything that we do. And I always want to do something different in a book. So for like American Trader, my last book, there are, the Roomba vacuum that runs around your house. It maps your house and it sends it to the cloud. It determines, the first time it vacuums your house, it takes like 6 hours. And then the next time it's 4 hours. And eventually it takes an hour for him to vacuum your house. And it's because it understands what's inside your house and it sends that to the cloud. Well, if I can crack that cloud as a criminal, they do it. And I now know your floor plan. Well, if I'm an assaulter as a counterterrorist guy, that's the golden ticket. What is on the floor plan? Because every time we hit a house, you have to assume the worst case scenario. You never knew what you were going to hit. Well, if you give me the map of the house, I can certainly smoke through that thing. And it's the same way with this book. Every time I write a book, I'm like, okay, the technology is just getting so fast and so fast and so fast. There's all these things that people in America or the world really, they don't realize how much information they're giving up. And that's what I use.
You do an amazing amount of research for each of your books. And I've heard you say that only 10% of your research actually ends up in the book. Now, in my heart, I'm an archivist, and we have a tendency to want to save things. And someday you'll have a huge body of work and all these research notes. Have you thought about archiving your research notes or where you're going to put your archives or your manuscripts?
Well, I'll tell you this. The archiving actually saved my life on this one, because I always want to travel overseas and then what we used to call sight, sound, smells of the battlefield, understand the culture, see what's on the ground before I write the book. You can't get that from Google Earth. And I got locked in for COVID. I couldn't fly anywhere. Nobody would let us go anywhere. And luckily, only 10% of my books make it or my research makes it into a book. And also, luckily, iPhotos saved all my pictures. And so I started going back through it, going, all right, where have you been that you can describe that didn't make it in the book? For instance, the grottos on the Lebanese border with Israel. That's a real place. It's a fascinating place. It had all kinds of things in there. I was just like dying to put in a book, and I couldn't figure out how to do it back when I did the research there. And this time I was like, all right, you didn't put that in a book, put this in a book. Interlaken, Switzerland. My wife actually is the one that did the paragliding, and I didn't do it. When I had to write the assassination scene in the very first, it's not a spoiler. I guess it's a spoiler, but it's first 2 chapters. The assassination scene, I said, give me all of your videos from that paragliding experience. I don't want to see your face smiling. I want to see the 3-ring loop assembly that he's got. I want to see where the reserve is. I want to see how he's controlling the paraglider. And that's what I used.
So we've talked a little bit about mechanisms of character and some of these technology things. How do you think settings fit into these? I think it's very interesting. You've not written about specific places I would have thought you would have written about, like Canada, or domestically. I mean, do you think setting a book in Kansas is hugely different than setting a book in Nepal?
Well, it's a little bit of a victim of my own success, I guess. So when I wrote my first book, One Rough Man, I wanted to write a story of redemption. That's all I wanted to do. If I'd have been a police officer, Pike would have been a cop. If I'd have been a priest, Jennifer would have been a nun. I was a counter-terrorist commando, and so that's what he became. And I knew that I didn't want to write about any organizations that I'd ever served in because they're classified. So I created the task force out of whole cloth. I mean, just completely made it up. And in so doing, I said to myself, well, there's got to be they wouldn't let them run them up. There's going to be some kind of oversight. There's going to be some kind of charter they have to do. And so I created a charter. And part of that charter was you're not allowed to operate on U.S. soil. And once I wrote that, I was like, now I really want to operate on U.S. soil. I wrote myself into a box. And a lot of that happens is I have to now re-wicker, you've created this universe that these guys are not allowed to do A, B, C, and D. But now I want them to do A, B, C, and D. As far as, writing about the United States, they have operated in the United States. In fact, book 2, All Necessary Force, are running amok in the United States. As far as Canada goes, I have not been to Canada yet, but it's only because they don't have a lot of terrorists up there.
So that brings me to number 17. I understand that you generally do 2 books a year, and you're probably in the process of writing or editing number 17. Can you tell us some little wonderful Easter egg, like the setting for 17?
Yeah, actually 17. So I didn't get to travel for book 16 in days that you're reading now, but I had an enormously long thing I planned out, and I didn't get to do it. So I just did it. So I went to Croatia. We started out in Zagreb and rented a car and went to hit every town from the north of Croatia all the way to the south to Dubrovnik, and hit every town in between. And I'm working on that book right now.
Well, we'll look forward to that. I understand that you've known at least since 1988 that you wanted to be a writer. And I guess my question is, has it lived up to everything you thought it was?
Actually, I didn't know what being a writer meant. It was a hard choice for me. I mean, I came out on the promotion list for Bird Colonel. My daughter was entering high school. My next assignment was 2 years unaccompanied to Southwest Asia. I was supposed to go back to Special Mission Unit at Fort Bragg. My wife said, if you wanted to stay in the military, you shouldn't have come down to Charleston because I like it here. And I had to make a choice. And I decided to give it writing a try. I mean, I still do security consulting because writing wasn't, putting shoes on my kids' feet. But it's absolutely been everything I would have thought. I'm not sure how to answer that because I don't know a whole lot of other, I've done a lot of stuff in my life, but this was just one of those things, and it worked out. It's worked out for me. I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Well, then I'll move on. And since you mentioned South Carolina, and COVID is unfortunately part of life these days, you can tell us a little about COVID making a picture or making an appearance in the book, and characters getting locked down in South Carolina, and maybe it helped you with your research in some of the sites?
Yeah, actually, that was a hard choice. So American Trader, my last book, I went to Taiwan, I went to Australia, did the book research, and came home and was banging the book out. And then we got locked in by COVID. COVID had just hit. And so I was like, do I put that in the book? I mean, I was just in the Shinlen night market with 1,000 people. Now there's nobody there. Pike's going to do a surveillance effort in the Sydney Harbor outside the Opera House, but now there's nobody on the street. It's going to be Pike and one other guy. And I was like, how do I do this? Do I just ignore it? And so I punted and said that I'm going to set that book in January 2020 during the Taiwanese election, which is basically what the book was about. So it wasn't that big a deal. But then I had to write this book, and we're still locked in. I mean, nobody's allowed to fly anywhere. There's nowhere you can go. And I was saying, do I just ignore this whole thing and just say COVID doesn't exist and just write something, or do I include it? And the problem with writing about current events is they're current. COVID exists. It's there. Everybody's living with it. And so I decided to use it. And the book's not about COVID. It's just one more thing that the task force has to deal with. They have to deal with the weather. They have to deal with flight plans. They have to deal with the target. They have to deal with the enemy. Now they have to deal with COVID. It's just one more thing they have to deal with. And I decided to include it in the book.
I work at a library, so let's talk a little bit about libraries. I understand that you would get kicked out of the house to go write somewhere and would frequent libraries at times. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've written there's a historical library here that's, according to them, which I have no reason to doubt, it's the second oldest library in the United States of America. I've written there. I've written at the College of Charleston Library. I've written at our own Mount Pleasant Library. Yeah, absolutely.
And I understand that you're quite a voracious reader as a young man, and that one of your favorite books had to do with a bunch of rabbits, otherwise known as Watership Down.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite book of all time. People ask me that, and it was like, really? That's your favorite book? I'm like, yep, that's it.
My question as a librarian is Pike Logan bigwig?
No. Come on. So yeah, I guess maybe a little bit. I don't know.
I just think they seem to have many of the same characteristics. I mean,
yeah,
fighting for the greater good.
Nobody's ever asked me that question before, but now that I think about it, yeah, I guess so.
And my next question is, when it comes to libraries, I was very impressed when I looked at your website and you had a list of books that you listed that you thought people should read to learn more about given areas of the world and our troubles and transgressions and policies in those areas of the world. It's very obvious to me, even by looking at your bookshelf behind you, you're a voracious reader. Do you find yourself reading more or writing more?
Now I find myself writing more, unfortunately. I want to read, there's, the to be read list everybody talks about. I've got one that's like 18 books tall on my bedside table. And I would really like to get to read them, but the writing itself, I read so much of my own stuff that I don't get the chance to do it.
What do your girls think of your writing?
So my younger daughter, it's funny you say that because I always nail them for, you haven't read my book. My younger daughter, and actually it's in this book. She was really young after I wrote One Rough Man and I was writing the second book. And she said, hey, are Pike and Jennifer going to get married? And I said, I haven't really thought about that. I'm not sure. Well, when they do, here's what's going to happen. She's at the altar. Terrorists come running in. She rips her skirt off and starts throwing grenades and kills everybody. And I was like, I'll take that under advisement if you want me to put that in there. So every year she would say, is it in the book? I was like, no, not yet. Well, now it's 16 books later and she's in college. And
she got a byline.
You finally made the book. So it's a daydream Pike has, because it's obviously not anything I could actually say this really happened in a book. And I said, your story actually made the book. Now you're in it. And she was like, I'm at college now. I don't really care.
Oh, geez. Pike and Jennifer have grown over the 16 books. Obviously, they've progressed. Now they're married. Do you anticipate writing about them when they're in their 60s and 70s?
Yes. And here's why I say that. So I never thought I'd have one book published, much less 16. I never thought I would have to deal with the aging process. So when I was on about book 7-ish, I guess, Robert Crace writes the Elvis Cole novels, very famous author, one of the guys I read every one of his books. And I cornered him one day. We were at a conference and I said, hey, how are you dealing with this? Because Elvis Cole was a Vietnam veteran. And in the early books, that was a big thing. He's a Vietnam veteran. He's doing A, B, C, and D. He goes to payphones, that kind of stuff. But eventually that, he was going to be in a wheelchair. He's like 90 years old being wheeled around. And I said, how'd you deal with this? And he said, I never mention his age again. I don't do it. Elvis Cole, I'm going to write Elvis Cole forever. And I don't say his age. Well, I told the reader Pike's age in the very first book, and I took that to heart. I was like, I'm not doing that either. So he actually told me, he's like, Elvis Cole's Superman. He doesn't age. I'll write the books forever, but he's Superman. He does not age. And I said, that's what I'm doing. Pike Logan is not going to age. So I'm not. People will leave the task force. There will be administration changes in the presidency. There will be people who come in the task force, new people, whatever. But Pike and Jennifer I'm not going to age them.
What would surprise fans the most about Pike and Jennifer that you haven't already written?
Everything, I think it's in the books. I'm not sure.
You don't have any huge, big revelations about them?
No, I mean, not that I'm going to say on this thing. What are you talking about? So,
well, I don't know. She might like to decorate or something. There might be something.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I put it on the page. I mean, people know Jennifer. People know Pike. That everything I put on the page is what they are. I don't have any secrets that I'm keeping. It was like, I have this thing that I'm not going to tell the reader, but everybody else would like to know it. No.
Speaking of what everybody wants to know, what do they want to know? What are your most common emails?
Well, I get a bazillion emails, and most of the time it's because I screwed something up. So those are my emails.
Okay. Tell us about your book tour. This is the first one back where you've gone in person as well as virtual. Are you having challenges with that?
Yeah, no, actually, it's been a good tour. Omicron's out there and everybody's worried about that and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, hey, I want to get back on the road. And so I told my publisher, I'm ready to get back on the road. And they said, well, if you're willing to do it, we'll do it. And so I've been to multiple bookstores, and surprisingly, people are sick of being locked in their house. They're like, yeah, I'll come out and hear a potted plant talk. Who's this guy? So I've had a really good response. I want to go out and see the fans. I want to go meet the people because it's been too long.
Now let's talk a little about the book. The title is End of Days, and it seems to me that that could be the title for so many books, but this book in particular deals with an unusual, I'm not sure whether to call organization, and their prophecies a little and revelations and their history. Could you speak a little bit about the Knights of Malta?
Yeah, actually, I came out of book research for Ring of Fire, which is like 5 books ago, I think. Came out of Morocco. I had a 2-day layover in Rome, and like anybody else, I was a great American tourist, and we did a Segway tour. And this car came by with diplomatic plates, and the tour guide said, "That's a Knight of Malta." I had never heard of them. I said, "Knights of Malta? What is that?" And he told me, and it was fascinating. It was they've been around since the First Crusade, 13th century. They have their own passports. They have diplomatic relations with a plethora of countries. They have a seat at the UN, observer status, but a seat at the UN. They make their own currency. They make their own postage, but they own no terrain. They don't have a state, so to speak. And I said, sooner or later, I'm going to put those guys in a book. And later on, I was doing book research for Daughter of War. I was in Switzerland, and I wanted to put them in the book. And so I asked the tour guide I was with, hey, have you ever heard of the Knights of Malta? Are they around here? And she showed me a ring with her Maltese cross on it and said, we don't talk about that in mixed company. And that was the end of the conversation. I was like, now I really want to put them in a book. And so when I got locked in for COVID, I said, okay, now it's the time. And, the one thing that works in COVID is Amazon. So I got about 8 books on the Knights of Malta and started doing some research and then put them in a book.
You want to talk a little bit how many people want you to bring these books to the film and filming, and your hesitancy maybe?
Yeah, I've probably I'm not the best guy for that. I've made some mistakes, and there's the problem with Hollywood is, number one, I don't understand them at all. And number two, when you sell the rights to your characters, to the books, you're done. I mean, I could say, yes, give me all your money and you have the rights to my books. And then they make Pike a midget and Jennifer a tree, which they can do because they own the rights. And so I've been kind of a coward about it. Number one, are you really going to make a movie? Because a lot of times they'll say, if you're going to do a action adventure movie with my character, you want to make sure that nobody else is competing with you. You don't want, White House Down and the other movie that came out, Operation Down. I can't remember. They were both the exact same movies. It came out at the exact same time. So you want to clear the slate. And so you'll buy the rights to all these other books, not because you're going to make a movie, because you don't want them to compete with you making a movie. So the number one thing is, are you really going to make a movie? And then number two is, are you really going to have the ethos of my books? And I understand that they have their own, I mean, you've got a director that's got his ethos. Here's what he's going to do. And you've got an actor who's got his own thing he's going to do. Do you really want the author standing behind all that going, you ain't getting this right? So
it's understandable.
Given both of those, I just had, as of yet, I have turned down offers.
Steve wants to know if you're open to or would like collaborations between Pike and any other fictional operators. Think Jack Reacher or somebody like that. Are you open to that? Do you have those kind of friendships with other writers that you would be willing to collaborate Pike with?
I actually absolutely have friendships with other authors. But no, I mean, the problem with collaboration like that, if you're talking about Mitch Rapp and if you're talking about Jack Reacher, Pike could kick his ass. Let's get something straight here right now. But if you're talking about, Mitch Rapp or Mark Greaney is a great friend of mine, the Gray Man series, all this other things that we all exist in our own universe. And my universe is different from his universe. So why would, I just can't see how I would actually mesh these two things. Why does your Orion team exist if you have the task force? It doesn't work. And the second thing is, I don't know how to actually collaborate. I'm not even sure how I'm a writer myself. I mean, I can imagine trying to write something with somebody else. Hey, we need to do this. No, we need to do that. I don't know how I would do that. Mark Greaney does it very successfully. He's done it over and over again. But I don't know how I'd do it.
I think 400,000 readers would testify to the fact that you're a good writer. There is another question in the question box, and they want to know if your books build on each other. Do you write them so that they should be read in order?
No, every book's a standalone. So you can pick up any book and read it right off the bat. And in fact, one of the hardest things about this is I have to I have to explain what's going on with the task force, the background, that kind of stuff, without boring the guy who is a seasoned reader. So the brand new reader, I have to give him enough information to know that this is what's going on, but without boring the hell out of the guy who's like, yeah, I've read your last 8 books. I don't really need to see this again. And so I've learned that, you can seed that stuff through the book. You don't need to start off with a PowerPoint saying, brand new reader, here is what we're looking at. And I seed it through the books. So the only thing that would happen if you read a brand new book of mine is you might get a spoiler, because the universe, it does exist. The Pike Logan universe exists. And so Pike and Jennifer and Knuckles and everybody else, they might talk about something that happened in a previous book. And then when you read the previous book, you may go, oh, I think I know what's going to happen here. That's about it.
Steve also wants to know, without breaking national security, how much of your past is in Pike Logan? Are there colleagues out there of yours that would recognize some of the incidents?
There's nothing I've put in the books that I've actually accomplished, because that's all classified. But absolutely, my past is in the book. You can't help but do that. I mean, if you were going to write a scene about riding a bicycle, what would you think of? When's the last time I rode a bike? If you're going to write a scene about, there's going to be a gunfight in a grocery store. Where's the last grocery store I was in? What did that look like? So when I'm writing a scene about a gunfight, when I'm writing a scene about the planning for the gunfight, I'm writing a scene about assaulting a house, I can't help but not refer back to what I know. I mean, that's what I was. So when I start talking about assaulting someplace, I mean, when I look at it, when I'm writing a book, I mean, I'm literally looking at it like, if I was going to assault this place, how would I do it? And then I write it.
Carol wants to know about Knuckles. What do you see in the future for Knuckles? And does he have an actual real name?
Oh, that's the biggest challenge ever. I get asked that all. I get asked that so much that I'm wondering if I'm ever going to give him a real name. That's going to be like, I could auction that off and make $1 bazillion for some charity, because everybody's like, what's Knuckles' real name? And she's right. He doesn't have a real name as of yet. His Knuckles was my wife's, came up with that call sign. and it's been there ever since. But sooner or later, he's going to have a real name, and I'm trying to I want to leverage that for Special Operations Warrior Foundation or something to get some money out of it.
Carol has one more question. Speaking of call signs, she wants to know, what was your call sign? Can you reveal it?
Yeah, I can. My call sign was Woody, and it was Woody because apparently you don't get a call sign for doing anything good. You always get a call sign for something that went wrong. And I was on a target in Iraq, and apparently I looked like Tom Hanks from Toy Story running around, and I looked like Woody, and it stuck. And I've been Woody ever since.
Brad wants to know, what's your favorite restaurant in Charleston?
Hall's Chop House. They're actually in End of Days. The end of the book is in End of Days.
So how soon can we anticipate another new book? When does 17 drop?
Next year, January. I'm behind as usual, trying to write it. But yeah, I've already been to Croatia. I've done the book research. So now I'm slaving away on it.
What does your number one editor, AKA spouse, what is her most frequent criticism of your books?
It's gotten less over time, to be honest with you. I've gotten better at writing. It used to be that when I wrote military scenes, because in my own head, I'm like, I know exactly what's going on here. Boom, 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 boom. I'm going to shoot here, do this, do that. And she would read it and go, I don't understand what the hell's going on here, which would force me to a rewrite. They're talking about my wife, which is the deputy commander of everything. DCOE, as I call her. So now when I write something, she's the first reader, because if you were a military person, you'd read my book and go, oh, I completely get it. Well, if she reads it and says, I have no idea what the hell's going on here, then I know I have to rewrite it, because I'm not writing for military people. I'm writing for everybody. And so she's the one that keeps me straight on that.
What motivates you or challenges you to get up every morning and write?
A deadline? I'm not sure what.
I don't know. Well, different people are motivated by, is it a deadline, or is it developing your characters more?
No, it's just I enjoy writing. I mean, there's nothing that motivates. I mean, I don't wake up and say, oh my God, I have to write. I enjoy writing. That's
good.
That's what I do.
Well, we're happy that you do. Don't get me wrong. What is it that you aspire? Do you aspire to write any other kind of genre, nonfiction?
No, I mean, I do have a national security blog that I had, but we're so polarized as a country. I actually haven't blogged in a long time because everybody seems to think you're poking them in the eye. I would never write nonfiction just because it's all classified. Everything I did was classified, and I'm not stepping over that.
So you really can't use a great deal of what you experienced then. You didn't keep a journal or a diary and put all of this in a diary and go back to that and say, oh, I can use that in this plot.
No, absolutely not. I never kept a journal. I was in Afghanistan, I was in Iraq, I was in all over the place, and no, I didn't. People who do that, I tend to think that they set out to do that. They're oh, I'm going to make this great American war story. And I'm like, no, I didn't do that.
This is a great time for me to tell the audience you can put further questions in the question box, and I'll be happy to ask them for you. We're just right at a point where I'm out of questions in the question box, but I've got more of my own, so just don't worry about that. When you talk about this voluminous amount of research that you do, how much time are you investing in each book for this research? 6 months, a year, or is it more limited?
It's kind of threaded, actually, to be honest with you. So I always want to do on the ground research if I can. And what we used to call sight, sound, smells of the battlefield. You want to know what's outside the wire before you left the wire. And so there's only so much that Google Earth or Street View can give you. You really want to know what is going on here. So, for instance, I just left Croatia, and I started off in Zagreb and went all the way down to Dubrovnik. And as you go down that country, everything is different. Every bit of it is different. Each time you enter a new town, it's different. They had their own culture. They had their own systems of things that are going on, and you learn that when you're going. But having said that, when I start writing a book, I'm doing research all the time. So I'm writing something and I'm going to say this or that or whatever I want to say, and I'm like, is that right? And then I'm popping up Google, doing some research. So it's not like I do. It's not a one and then two thing. It's not did all the research, time to write. It's more a continual flow of I got to check this out before I put this in the book. And even then, I'm telling you, I get emails all the time. Yeah, you screwed this up. So I'm never perfect. I do the best I can, but there's somebody who is an expert on the turd burglar of a shrew that lives in Australia who will tell me you didn't do that right. So
Robert wants to know, what's the most creative time of the day for you to write?
I would say my most creative time to write is after I work out, probably about 1-ish, I guess. I wake up, eat breakfast, go work out, think about the book, and then start typing. And well, that's not really true either, because a lot of times I'll write till 4 a.m. I mean, my wife will go to bed and I'm like banging away. When it comes to me, it comes to me. If it doesn't come to me, I don't type. A lot of people talk about, when do you write? And what they really mean is, when do you type? I mean, when do you type on the page? But I'm always writing. If I'm in the shower, I'm writing. If I'm walking the dog, I'm writing. It's in my head. I'm writing. Now, when do I sit down and type? That's a different story.
Steve wants to know, if you were in a bar with Pike and the two of you were sitting there talking, what advice would you give him?
What advice would I give Pike?
Yes.
He'd be giving me advice. What are you talking about? So, I mean, at the end of the day, what I like to say is there's probably 1% of the world that could play on the PGA Tour. That's it. I mean, that the skill that is required to play on the PGA Tour is about 1%. There's Tiger Woods, and there's this guy who's 100th on the money list, which nobody in America's ever heard of. But he's still in that 1%. That's me. I served with, I trained with, I did everything that was required to be in that level. But I'm 100 on the money list, and Pike Logan's Tiger Woods. And I've served with a lot of Pike Logans, but I'm not he. So
there's a question about Amina. Do you have any plans for a bigger part for her in the future books?
Oh man, Amina, it's caused me more. What happens when I write my books is I give 100% to that one book. I wish I had some plan that, in this book, I'm going to do this, and that book, I'm going to do that. And I don't. I give 100% to that book. And so Daughter of War, which was actually titled Shadow Strike, believe it or not, it had nothing to do with Amina. I was going to kill her in chapter 4. She was only the link to continue the plot for the book. And by the time I created her and I wrote about her, I liked her too much. I said, I like her too much. I'm going to let her go. And she overtook the book, Daughter of War, which obviously the book was called Shadow Strike, and the title changed to Daughter of War. when it was all said and done, it's one of my favorite books. Actually, it's one of the best books I've ever written. But now she exists, and I'm like, holy moly, what am I going to do about that? I mean, I can't start the next book without talking about Amina. And I actually told my editor I'm going to start the next book off at a funeral and say, poor Amina got hit by a car, and now she's dead.
Oh.
Of course, I didn't do that, but it was really hard to figure out what in the world am I going to do with Amina now. And I'm working that out now. She's been in a couple of books, and she's actually, I'm writing book 17. She's in that one. But I don't know what I'm going to do with her. I wish I had some ability to plan ahead. Like, well, I've got 4 books to go, and here's what I'm going to do. I don't do that. I put 100% into the book I'm writing, and then let the fallout come where it may.
Stephanie has a related question, though. Have you ever thought about introducing a new series with new characters? Do you anticipate your future books to be strictly about Pike and Jennifer?
Yeah, I get asked that question quite a bit, actually. And if I was going to do a spinoff or a new series, I think what I'd end up doing is writing Pike and Jennifer. Instead of Jennifer having blonde hair, she'd have brown hair. And instead of Pike having blue eyes, he'd have brown eyes. It'd be the same thing. I could do, I thought about doing a spinoff with Aaron and Shoshana. But I don't know enough about the Mossad. I mean, I understand special operations in the United States. I absolutely understand that. I don't know enough about how those guys operate. I know enough to fake the funk a little bit, but I don't know enough to really write about that. And I think if I wrote a new series, I'd be writing about Pike and Jennifer, just different people, but it'd be them.
There's a reader that wants to know how close to reality are the facts that you present in your book? How much is literary license?
Oh, absolutely. It's factual. I mean, I do a ton of research, absolute ton of research. The only thing that's not factual, I would say, is that the amount of gunfights and trauma that Pike and the task force get into, that's not really factual. That doesn't happen that often. But when you get at the granular level, when you're talking about the gunfight itself, when Pike is on the ground, that's absolutely factual. But we don't, people ask me if you're going to write a book about real world situations, what you'd get was 300 pages of PowerPoints saying, please let me do this. And then the last chapter would be, you're denied. So, when but if they actually did the mission, that absolutely it's factual, as factual as I can make it.
Can you speak a little bit about politics and keeping politics out of plots?
Yeah, well, that's actually what I would say. I don't do politics. I hate it. I don't read books for politics. I'm a voracious reader in and of itself. I don't read books for politics. I don't want to hear your views. Just give me a story. And I don't do that. This is my 16th book. I've been through several different presidential administrations in my book. Never once have I said what party they belong to. Never once have I said what they adhere to as far as our own politics. I don't do politics. I don't like politics. I want to read for escapism. I don't want to pick up somebody's book and then start bashing me in the head about A or B, whatever side it is, left or right. I don't want to read that. And I don't do politics in my books.
Someone else wants to know about the development of storylines. So you think of these things in the shower or when you're working out. How do you fit all the details together? Do you sit down and sort of mesh them all out?
No, it's actually more of a eclectic thing. I get feeds from all over the world. I still do security consulting for various agencies, and so I get feeds everywhere. And every once in a while, something will hit me, and I'll say, "Wow, that could be a book." And then it just germinates in my head. And when I start writing the book, once I start doing the research, once I get on the ground, once I can run around and see what's going on, other things pop up. I'm like, holy moly, that'll work in the book too. And it's more of a, it's not like I sit there and wake up one morning and say, here's my entire book. It's more of a evolution where I see stuff and I start leveraging what I see for the book itself.
Carol said you've alluded to other task force teams in other books. There are a variety of task forces with different responsibilities. Will you ever develop one or two of those groups?
Yeah. So the task force itself, like I said, I created it out of whole cloth. I knew how we would do it if we really did have such an organization. And so I knew we'd have more than one team. Pike's not going to be the only team there. So there's a couple other teams there. And the funniest story about that is I ran out of call signs. So if you're writing a book and you're going to put somebody's call sign in there, you don't want it to be at the call sign of somebody who actually exists, because then they think you're writing about him. And I was on a security contract, and I had Johnny. Johnny's another team leader. J-Boy's got his team going. And I said, I don't have any more call signs. Can I use your call sign? And the guy I'm talking to he looks like, Call of Duty. He's 6'4", bald head, giant man. And he said, well, is he going to be, I'm going to use a P word. He's going to be a P word. And I was like, no, he won't. Can I use your call sign? He says, let me read it when you're done. And so I wrote that scene, and his call sign's Axe. And if anybody's read the books, they'll know who Axe is. But he read it and was like, all right, I'll let you use my call sign.
Brad, thank you for an hour worth of my questions and others and answering these. I would encourage everybody to read End of Days. It's a wonderful way to spend a couple of hours and get away from reality. And even though there are parts of reality there with COVID and with Pike and Jennifer as our favorite characters, but thank you for both writing these. Thank you for your service to the military. Thank you for continually taking time to do this kind of a book tour when you don't necessarily have to. We really appreciate your efforts and your time, and your wife, and even your daughter. You should give her a byline. So thank you. And we look forward to number 17, 18, and 19.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Well, I hope that sometime you'll be able to come to Hudson and see what a wonderful community it is. And we're pretty close to Lake Erie in that country across the lake. That you might
want. Yeah, you're probably all blanketed by snow right now and ice.
19 inches. 19 inches. So please, in the next time you're in Hudson, come by the library and say hello. I'm glad to have met you this way virtually, but I hope that someday I get to meet you in person and I can introduce you to the wonderful readers in these communities. And I hope the computer helps us do that as well. Thanks
Absolutely.
for your service. Thanks for the time. We really appreciate it. And we've had a great evening. I hope you have
Thank you very much. Absolutely. I enjoyed it.
All right. Have a good night. Thank you everyone for joining us.